a submarine name for me.
President Jimmy Carter is my guest, and his novel, The Hornet's Nest, which is a Revolutionary War novel, has just been published in paperback. One of the things you do with your Carter Center is to monitor elections around the world. And you've monitored over 50 elections around the world. We are facing a U.S. presidential election here. And I'm wondering if America was a foreign country and it had asked you to monitor the election, would it meet your criteria? Could you monitor the American elections if you were asked?
No, we wouldn't think of it. The American political system wouldn't measure up to any sort of international standard for several reasons. One is that there has to be a provision in the countries where we monitor. We've just finished our 52nd one, that all the qualified candidates have equal access to the public through the media, through television, radio, and they don't have to pay for it. Whereas in this country, there's no way that you can hope to be the nominee of the Democratic or Republican Party unless you have the proven ability to raise, nowadays, $100 million contributions from special interest groups. Some of the interest groups are benevolent, I might hasten to add. That's one thing. It wouldn't qualify.
Why do you have that as a qualification, as a criteria?
Why?
Yeah.
Well, because we think that the ability to run for office and be seriously considered as a candidate should not depend on how much money you can collect to pay for the right to give your campaign platform explanations to the public.
Okay. Other reasons why we would not fulfill your criteria.
Okay. The second reason is we don't go into a country unless there is a Central Election Commission that is recognized generally as being nonpartisan or bipartisan, and that is a balanced position between or among the different parties. We have nothing like that. As you know, in Florida in the year 2000, the Secretary of State there, who was in charge of the Florida election, was an avowed and fervent and very obvious Republican activist.
This was Catherine Harris.
Catherine Harris, and she was later elected to Congress because Republicans appreciated what she did for President Bush. And this time, the new Secretary of State, who replaced Catherine Harris, was not elected. She was appointed to that very important partisan position by the governor, who happens to be President Bush's brother. So there's no semblance of a balanced commission that would be objective among the different candidates. I mean, they don't even deny the fact that they are fervent Republican activists. Another facet of requirements is that all the people in a country, or certainly a state, should vote in exactly the same way, either punch cards or touch screens or whatever. Whereas in Florida and many other states, it depends on what preferences the county officials have. So you might have, like in Florida in 2000, multiple ways to vote. And quite often, the more affluent districts or precincts are the most certain to have the votes counted accurately because the rich people insist on it, whereas the poor people don't really have the political influence to insist that their votes be handled properly. That's another very important facet. And the third thing is that the fourth thing I think now is that if there is a technological advanced way to vote, there must be some way for a physical recount if it's very close. We just finished an election not too long ago in a third world country that had a touch screen technique. The system was developed in the United States previously in Spain, but in addition to casting their vote, after they punch the touchscreen final button, out comes a paper ballot showing you exactly how you voted. So you look at the paper ballot and you make sure that is the way I wanted my vote to be cast, and then you fold the ballot and put it in a box. So afterwards, if there is a doubt about the technology or the touchscreen techniques, since it's all secret and you can't see it, then you can recount by using the paper ballot. We've only less than 2 weeks to go now in Florida. That is a matter of major concern in the federal courts. Is there going to be a way in Florida to have a recount with paper ballots or some other certifiable way if there is a very close election as we had 4 years ago?
And I know that's an issue in New Jersey also. There's electronic voting machines that don't have paper ballots, and that can't be recounted.
Exactly,
that way.
and it happens in multiple places. After the 2000 embarrassment or debacle, whatever you want to call it, There was a nationwide Blue Ribbon Commission formed with about 40 to 50 people, I think 40. 20 were Democrats, prominent Democrats, 20 were Republicans. I was the one chairperson, and Gerald Ford, former Republican president, was the other. And we worked on that for months with the finest possible staff, highly qualified people. And we made a whole series of recommendations about the very facets of things that I've just described to you, and very few of them have been implemented.
What do we do now with the electronic voting machines that don't have any kind of way of recounting? We're just days away from the election.
Well, I think now it's too late.
Mm-hmm.
You can't change the whole technology, but when we have gone into countries, as I say, we have insisted whenever possible that there be a paper trail, and the technology is completely available. In fact, the same companies that prepare these machines with the printed affirmation are the ones that we've used in other countries.
Then what's your best guess about why we're not using the ones with the paper trail?
Part of it, I think, is the pride of America. We don't need other people to tell us how to run our election. We are the greatest democracy on earth. We are above any outside criticism. That's part of it, is pride and, I would say, sovereignty of our country or our states. Another one is that they are people who are very deeply interested in maintaining the outcome of the election under partial control. Our country favors incumbents strongly. If you look at the record of elections or re-elections in the U.S. Congress, overwhelmingly, if you are an incumbent Congress member, you can get reelected because you have access to special interest groups who want to buy legally your help in the Congress, and they will give you enormous sums of money. And the way you win an election in this country now is through television advertising primarily, and you depend not on telling your own story, but destroying the integrity and the reputation of your opponent with negative advertising. And that's a fairly new development. It existed not at all when I ran for president against Gerald Ford and then later against Governor Reagan. We only referred to each other as my distinguished opponent. And we would not have dreamed of having a negative campaign commercial that would have insinuated that our opponent was a liar or had any defects in his character. It would have been suicidal for us. But in the last 20 years or less, that has become the prevalent way to win an election, is negative advertising, destroying the reputation of your opponent.
Now, let me ask you, some of the electronic voting machines being used in the country are manufactured by the Diebold Company.
Yes.
And the head of that company is very partisan, very pro-Republican. Some people think that means that those machines might be tampered with, that there might be partisan interference. Other people see that as a really silly conspiratorial point of view. From your point of view, is that something we should be concerned about?
I think it is. I would like to see there be a uniform standard around this nation before the next presidential election, at least, that any machine used of a touchscreen type had to have a paper trail so that you could subsequently monitor or confirm the accuracy of the vote as cast. And in most touchscreen systems, including those of the Diebold Company, I understand, there's no way to recount. You have to trust the manufacturer of the machine, and you have to trust the people who set the machine up, who program it, and you have to trust the people who get the decipherment of the vote out of the machine when the election's over.
I realize here, in other countries you are a nonpartisan. In our country, you would be perceived as a partisan because you're a Democrat, you're a former Democratic president, you support the Democratic candidate. So I feel like we should acknowledge that in this conversation, that you are not as neutral within our country as you are when you go to other countries.
That's certainly true. I don't deny that.
Right. But you are trying to apply the same principles in your analysis now that you use in other countries.
Well, the principles that I tried to apply were formed by me and President Gerald Ford on an equal basis, and with 40 other highly motivated and very knowledgeable Republicans and Democrats. And the decisions and recommendations were unanimous, I might say.
My guest is Jimmy Carter. His novel, The Hornet's Nest, set during the Revolutionary